Welcome to Nutrek Trav. I'm Trav, and today we're talking about, basically, I wanted to talk about the different stages in Star Trek and how I feel in regards to Nutrek and TNG and the original series. Now, I didn't grow up on the original series. The first episode I saw of the original series was City on the Edge of Forever. And it was a really good episode, like one of the best, which I learned later. And it was on a VHS tape, which I'm pretty sure was a bootleg. And it wasn't amazing, but it's like, oh, this is cool. That's the first episode of TOS I ever watched. Since then, I've watched a lot more, but I find it really hard to watch them without the special editions where they have new special effects. I love the old special effects, but at the same time, the ship just doesn't hold up. In terms of me growing up, my first experience with Star Trek was walking into a toy store and seeing a Geordie LaForge figure from TNG. I saw the ship on the back of the box. It looked amazing. And then I saw it advertised on TV, and I'm like, I have to watch that. And what that came with, and I got my mum to record it on VCR. I'm that old. And I got to watch The Cage, the original pilot, but with the Gene Roddenberry introduced. And I got to watch Star Trek Next Generation pilot Encounter at Farpoint. Now, The Cage holds a special place, weirdly, because I thought it was amazing. I loved the pilot for The Cage, although now looking back, little off in some places. I really enjoyed TNG as well, and it wasn't for the story. I remember Q being really fun. I remember the aliens being fun. I certainly think that TNG's first and second season, like as a kid, I think I was too young. So I was 5 in 1990. Which is when TNG started or had just started airing in Australia. And I really enjoyed seeing the technology and the aliens, but I didn't get to watch a lot of probably the first 4 seasons of TNG religiously. I got to nag my mum to record the video, and I got to watch TNG that way. DS9, I was a bit older, so I could watch a bit of that. Voyager, I watched a lot of Voyager, was pretty much I watched every night. And Enterprise was the same. I actually watched it 6 months before it aired here on other means, actually on YouTube, funnily enough, back in the day. And do you know what? The TNG era defined it. Like, I didn't realize until I got older how much TNG really influenced my liking. So TNG was like my stepping off point. It was like the most fantastic thing. And when I watched this new era, especially with Picard and a lot of the TNG influences in Lower Decks and now with Prodigy, that era is reflected on in a very nostalgic way. And I find it curious that this is the area they went in. Obviously, with the Next Generation, the original series had been doing films for a while. They'd done the animated series. I didn't even know about the animated series until about 98. And it would look terrible, so I didn't even bother watching it back then. The newest versions of Star Trek seem to be very focused on the TNG era. Obviously, a lot of the actors are still alive. It's just a lot easier to watch for people. Now, a lot of people my age, in their mid to late 30s, very much feel that the new series of Trek is nothing like the TNG era, and the TNG era is perfect. There's this real covering of the eyes in regards to all of those shows had pretty dodgy first and second seasons, with a lot more episodes. So each season of TNG was like 26 episodes, most of them. Deep Space Nine was the same, Voyager was the same, Enterprise got it reduced towards the end. And a lot of the problems with those shows was they never really hit it out of the ballpark in the beginning. And all of these people are watching Discovery and Discovery and Picard, and they're going, oh, well, the TNG shows were so much better. They're trying to do the same amount of entertainment in 10 episodes. Discovery got a little bit more, but overall, they're trying to create the same dynamics within 10 to 13 episodes. TNG had an entire season. Like, we didn't really get to know a lot of those characters until the second, third, fourth seasons. Like, it took a long time to get to know them with more episodes. Like, one season of TNG is two and a bit seasons of Star Trek Discovery or Strange New Worlds. So I found it really surprising that my generation personally didn't accept the change in the way things were done. So Discovery came not right after, but a few years after the 2009 reboot movies. And it was very much about taking the influence of the action and the epicness of that and mixing it with old Star Trek, but then also taking over the influences. Now, the biggest influence for the current years of Star Trek, so we're talking Picard, Discovery, Lower Decks, not so much, and I would say certainly not Prodigy either. Strange New Worlds is obviously very harkening back to the original series and tonally the TNG era. Now, the series that influences this generation and a lot of Star Trek since its inception is Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Now, I personally, when I was a kid, thought Deep Space Nine was the most boring load of bollocks I'd ever seen. And now I look at it as one of the best shows you ever watched. Even the first season, where they're still building up the things, you still need to get to know the characters. So there's a lot of elements in that first season which pay off later on. And that influenced the New Trek era. And you can see it. You can even see Deep Space Nine influenced every show after it. Voyager was on at the same time, and they tonally shifted towards TNG. But Enterprise very much didn't go, they sort of started off a bit like Voyager and then shifted into very much like Deep Space Nine. Discovery, tonally very Deep Space Nine, very trying to be intriguing, but obviously shoving a lot more action in there on a bigger budget. Strange New Worlds hits the tone of the TNG era with the look and the feel of the 60s era, which I understand is how people wanted these shows to be rebooted now anyway. I don't have a problem with a Star Trek show exploring these other facets of the galaxy and different tones of show. An example being Prodigy, I have trouble watching. I watch it every week, and I sometimes do reviews. I've been a bit slack lately. But I have trouble getting into it because tonally it's not for me. I love seeing Voyager. The nostalgia's still there, but it's just not, it doesn't speak to me the way TNG stuff does. Discovery, it took me a while to accept that this is a different production team, this is a different what's going on, it's a different way of writing television now. So I very much, I understood why they were doing what they were doing. And the problem with Discovery, and in my opinion, probably the biggest problem with Discovery, is this era of Star Trek is very scared of losing its base audience. So in the TNG era, TNG built up a huge audience. It took a while, but they managed to pull all their fans in and some new ones. And they held on to them for a good period of time. Enterprise obviously lost a lot of them. It was just one show too many, and it was on a specific network that no one could get. So when we get to Discovery and Strange New Worlds and the tone shift between the two, Discovery was taking its look from things like the Star Trek 2009 films, other streaming programs on the platform, and trying to do something new. Brian Fuller, for example, who had worked on Star Trek before, very much wanted to update the Klingons. And the Klingons, I don't dislike them, but they're not my favourite version of the Klingons. I don't have a problem with this because in the motion picture from the original series, the Klingons were changed. They've done it before, why can't they do it again? And a lot of fans feel like this is a negative thing. So in order for a franchise or series to grow, and this is very much where Star Wars went wrong with the prequel films, you don't just feed them nostalgia to keep the old audience. You have to invigorate a new audience. Now, the prequels did this for Star Wars. No TNG era series reinvigorated after TNG. The 2009 films were filmed, so they got a bit of buzz and then they disappeared, a bit of buzz and then disappeared. But the new version of Star Trek really has taken, okay, we can't have concurrent series running that are tonally the same. Picard tries to be more adult. I don't feel like it's that much more adult. Occasionally they say a swear word and occasionally there's blood. Discovery goes for the action-orientated, this is amazing, big spectacle. Strange New Worlds is trying to go back to the episodic format. Now, Strange New Worlds is a failure of executives to acknowledge that in order to have a new audience, you have to kind of not alienate the old audience, but push them to a side a little bit. Go, look, we're going to have the Remember Berries, or the Remembering, but it's not going to be our primary source. And Discovery did this in the beginning. And I know a lot of new fans who came in through Discovery, but don't like Picard. And it's a very, very different feeling and a different... Strange New Worlds sort of got from the old fans, oh, this is the Trek we've been asking for. But you know what? The Trek you're asking for is the Orville. The Orville is a copy of TNG era Trek, which did find its legs, but it's built on the foundation of TNG era fans. The entire production staff is TNG era production staff. Now, you can't have the same production staff and writers going for that whole time. It destroys the show. And I try to talk to people like this. My little brother, he's a huge Star Wars fan. He likes TNG, he likes a lot of that era, but he's had no interest in any of the newer Star Treks. He wasn't a Star Trek fan, he was a Star Wars fan. So, to me, a lot of people I've talked to who've got into Star Trek recently, particularly members of the LGBTQIA, people of colour, talk to me about how Discovery is brilliant. They talk to me about how Picard is interesting, and the Raffian 7 thing's a really big thing. So the demographic is sort of the demographic, and the shows have been feeding into that idic of infinite diversity and infinite combination, because what they're trying to do is do different combinations of the show that relate to different combinations of the audience, so that way they can pull in as many people as they want. And that's not a bad thing. I think Prodigy is an excellent introduction to Trek, although it makes no sense to me why Klingons and Kazon are in the same building. It doesn't make sense why they're wearing TNG era uniforms and why they've got Strange New Worlds, but they see an obviously TOS era ship in the original styling, not the Strange New Worlds styling. It seems like a design problem. I don't have any problems with any of these shows. I think tonally, I will watch all of them. It doesn't matter what it is. I will obviously judge them differently. I don't judge this era by the TNG era. I think that I did, when I was a kid, judge Voyager to TNG, and especially Enterprise to Voyager, because they're the ones I watched like on airing in Australia, back when we got it 6 months after you guys in the US. These days I can get the shows and I can watch them, and they're not on at the same time, but they're on one after each other. The one that doesn't grab me the most is Prodigy, but it is a really good show. You can see some of my reviews on the channel. I'll be doing a season 1 complete review when the season ends. I think Strange New Worlds had a really strong start, but it very much plays into the nostalgia narrative. I think Discovery has come ahead in terms of originality and where they're going, because they freed themselves up by leaving the 23rd century. Lower Decks is a fountain of remembering and change. And with Lower Decks, you can see, once again, my reviews, I've progressively got less interested. Mainly because the show hasn't defined itself as its own show. If you'd like to discuss these things separately, you can obviously write a comment or subscribe or go to my Twitter or all of these other things. But my feeling is that the new era is very different from the old era, in that I understand that every company is trying to milk their most famous franchise. That is pretty much it. Paramount is going, we've got Star Trek, we've got the rights to Halo, and we've got all of these other shows. And I understand that. I also get that Disney Plus is milking Star Wars. I get that all of these streaming services are doing the same thing to the franchises. What I do think is smart, and this might be an Alex Kurtzman decision or a Paramount decision, is that each series is significantly different. It's a different series with different styles, and it'll appeal to different demographics. I think Prodigy is an excellent entry point. I think Lower Decks is a good way for teens to sort of learn that. But I think Prodigy leans too much into the nostalgia, so it kind of isolates the teenagers as well. I think Discovery and Strange New Worlds are the strongest. I think Discovery, hands down, has nailed the idic of Star Trek and the motivations of Star Trek. I think Strange New Worlds has, but unfortunately is held back by some of its links, obviously, to the original series, where with a cast predominantly white. I don't think there's any gay members of the cast, except for Keith, the transporter guy. And I'm thinking number one. So what are your thoughts about the current era of Star Trek? What were your thoughts about the TNG era? Make sure to come back, like, comment, and subscribe for regular videos. Trying to get up to 400, hopefully by the end of this year, but I doubt it, by my birthday, which is in February. So make sure to come back for more Star Trek content.